Ask any Deadhead what shaped the Grateful Dead, and you'll get a familiar list. LSD, Ken Kesey, the Haight, and all of those matter. But the actual origin story starts in a place nobody expects, a teacher's offhand comment in an art school classroom. Sometime around 1960, a young Jerry Garcia and another student at the San Francisco Art Institute asked their teacher, Wally Hedrick, what beat meant. Hedrick looked at them and said they were the real beat generation, then sent them down the hill to City Lights bookstore to buy Jack Kerouac's On the Road. Garcia later said the book changed his life. Not his first acid trip, not his first jam session, a paperback from a North Beach bookshop. And the person that book was about, the real Dean Moriarty, the human engine behind all that spontaneous, reckless, present tense energy, was a man named Neal Cassady.
Well, Cassady is one of the kind of people that you know, he's he was such an overwhelming trip.
This is the argument I'm going to make, and I know it's a big one. Neal Cassady was the single most important influence on the Grateful Dead's identity. He never played a note, he never wrote a song, but without him, the Beats and the Dead are two completely separate chapters in American culture. With Cassady, they're one continuous line. To understand why that's true, you have to understand what Cassady actually was and what he wasn't. Born February 8th, 1926 in Salt Lake City, Neal's childhood was poverty in motion. He wandered Depression-era America with his father, a drifter and a drunk, learning the geography of the country through boxcars and flophouses. Dennis McNally, the Dead's official biographer, described the young Cassady's life as combining multiple auto thefts with reading Proust and Schopenhauer. By his teens, Neal had become one of the most efficient car thieves in Denver. But Cassady also had a hunger that went beyond survival. He wanted language, he wanted ideas, and he had a voice. This rapid-fire, rhythmic, multi-layered way of talking that could hold a room hostage. In 1946, Cassady showed up in New York and fell in with the Columbia University literary crowd, Jack Kerouac, Allen Ginsberg, the writers who would become the Beat generation. Neal didn't come to write. He came to ask Kerouac to teach him how. But what happened was the opposite. Cassady became the subject. Kerouac immortalized him as Dean Moriarty in On the Road, the restless, magnetic, speed-addled American who embodied everything the Beats believed about spontaneity and living in the present tense. Between 1946 and 49, Cassady and Kerouac crisscrossed the country together. They walked the Fillmore District jazz clubs in San Francisco, absorbing bebop, the improvisational, spontaneous, dangerous music that rewarded musicians who listened and responded in real time. That rhythm went into Kerouac's prose. That prose went into On the Road. And that book ended up in the hands of Jerry Garcia after Wally Hedrick sent him to City Lights. Garcia didn't just enjoy it. He said it opened doors he didn't know existed, that he might never have pursued a creative life without Kerouac and Cassady's example. So Cassady did something no one else in American culture ever did. He physically carried the Beat aesthetic forward into the next era. In 1964, Neal climbed behind the wheel of Ken Kesey's psychedelic bus, Furthur, and drove the merry pranksters across America. The moment the Beat generation's intellectual rebellion merged with LSD and became the psychedelic movement, and the man at the wheel, literally, was the same man Kerouac had written about 15 years earlier. The person who inspired the foundational text of the Beat generation is now driving the foundational vehicle of the psychedelic era. He's not adjacent to both movements. He is the bridge. The pranksters saw it. Ken Kesey said the only thing he could really say is everybody who ever knew Cassady was tremendously influenced and affected by him. People from all sorts of stations in life, from Stuart Brand to Garcia to Kerouac to Ginsberg to Burroughs to strange little teenage girls who had never read a book, were all very affected by him. And Ken Babbs, one of the original pranksters, described the Dead as the engine that was driving the spaceship we were traveling on. But even Babbs knew the spaceship had been built by someone else. Cassady was the one who'd been there from the beginning, from Kerouac's living room to Kesey's bus. Then in January 1966 came the Trips Festival, this massive convergence in San Francisco where Cassady, Kesey, the Dead, and thousands of people all ended up in the same room. The Beats met the hippies, the literary met the musical, and Neal Cassady was standing in the middle of it the same way he'd been standing in the middle of everything since 1946. By the fall of 1966, Cassady had moved into the Grateful Dead's communal house at 710 Ashbury Street. Neal lived in the attic, in a hammock slung from the rafters, with a couple of planks laid down so you could walk without falling between the floor joists. And this is where the popular mythology gets it wrong. Deadheads, and honestly, Most historians describe Ashbury as this anarchic, leaderless hippie commune. Everyone equal, no hierarchy, just vibes. Except that's not what the people who actually lived there said. McNally described the household dynamics plainly. Jerry was the generally benign, occasionally grumpy paterfamilias. Weir, of course, was the kid. Pigpen was the crusty uncle. But Bob Weir, in multiple interviews, placed someone else above all of them. Weir said their family situation was modeled after old-style big families where you have a paterfamilias. And then he named Cassady. We're all siblings, Weir said. We're all underlings to this guy, Neal Cassady. He had a guiding hand, though it was good and strange. Underlings. Jerry Garcia, Bob Weir, Phil Lesh. All of them underlings to a man who couldn't play their instruments. Weir went even further. If there was something on your mind, if you had a problem or an observation, you'd bring it to Dad. You'd bring it to Neal. This isn't a colorful anecdote. This is a direct challenge to the idea that the Dead were a leaderless democracy from the beginning. They had a father figure, a guide, a center of gravity, and it was the guy from Kerouac's book. Garcia reached for mythic language when he tried to describe what Cassady actually felt like in a room. He called Neal a breeze, some kind of incredible super-American mythos personality blasting through the highways of 1947 America. Weir called him the hood ornament on the chrome zephyr that came floating through American culture. These aren't the words people use for a house guest. These are the words people use for someone who changed the way they saw the world. But Cassady's influence wasn't just emotional or social. It was musical, and this is the part that even knowledgeable Deadheads tend to miss. Picture 710, Ashbury, 1967. Neal is in the attic, wired on speed, delivering these non-stop stream of consciousness monologues that could go on for hours. But they weren't rambling. They were rhythmic. They were literary. They were layered in a way that musicians recognized as musical. Cassady would quote Rilke, reference a car he stole in Denver in '48, pivot to a joke about guessing the serial number on a dollar bill, and land back on the original thread 45 seconds later without dropping a syllable. Paul Foster, who witnessed these performances, described them as interesting, voluminous, humorous, often rhyming and intimidatingly encyclopedic, and wrote that Cassady could handle simultaneously 8 channels of audio interchange, including items from all radios and televisions he had turned on, random street noise, conversations within earshot, and several secret thoughts. Bill Kreutzmann put it this way: Cassady could hold 7 conversations at once while doing a dozen other things. He was jazz personified, from the drummer of the Grateful Dead about a man who never touched a drum. Rock Scully, the Dead's manager, saw it too. At Thanksgiving at 7:10, Scully watched Cassady dance from table to table, delivering what Scully called a futurist collage. Vietnam news, movie reviews, White House gossip, all cut together in real time. Jerry loves it because you can talk over it or under it, relate to it or ignore it. Jerry and Phil, who are both well-read, listen to it like instantaneous poetry and toss lines back to him and feed the frenzy. Robert Hunter once taped a conversation with Cassady and then remarked, "I'd swear that every time I played it that there would be a different conversation with me on it. He was flying circles about me." And Garcia saw it most clearly of anyone. He was the first person I met who he himself was the art. He was an artist, and he was the art also. Not make art, become art. Garcia said Cassady was a combination of Lenny Bruce and Buster Keaton, the intellectual razor of one, the physical genius of the other, and described riding in a car with Neal as the ultimate fear experience. Cassady would drive at terrifying speed through San Francisco, 50 or 60 miles an hour, blind corners, disregarding anything, stop signs, signals, all the time talking to you and maybe fumbling around with a little teeny roach trying to put it in a matchbook, and also tuning the radio, and also talking to whoever else was in the car, and seeming to never put his eyes on the road. But Garcia understood something most people didn't. Cassady wasn't being reckless. He was demonstrating what it looked like to be completely present, processing every input at once, and responding to all of them simultaneously. Sound familiar? That's improvisation. That's what the Dead did every night on stage, and they learned it from watching a man drive a car. Sarah Ruppenthal, Garcia's first wife, saw it up close at one of the early acid tests. She described Cassady as having an extraordinary gift, doing his monologue while juggling a hammer, somehow tuning into everybody's reality at once. She called him a Martian policeman, as he called himself. Even people on the periphery of the Dead's world could feel the gravitational pull Cassady exerted. Then it ended. In early February 1968, Neal Cassady was found beside railroad tracks near San Miguel de Allende, Mexico. McNally reports he died on February 4th. Other sources place it a day or two earlier. Cassady was 41 years old. The cause was exposure. He had, in Garcia's words, been the 100% communicator, the furthest out guy Garcia would ever know, and now he was gone. McNally wrote that Cassady was very possibly the most highly evolved personality they would ever meet, and was certainly among their most profound life influences other than the psychedelic experience itself. But McNally also made clear that Neal wasn't a saint. He could burn the people around him, and often did. Even that complexity, though, that tension between brilliance and destruction, shaped how the Dead understood the cost of living at full tilt. Remember what I said about Cassady teaching the Dead to improvise? That all comes together on one specific night. 10 days after Cassady died, on Valentine's Day 1968, the Grateful Dead played the Carousel Ballroom in San Francisco. They knew. They'd learned of Neal's death when they returned from their Pacific Northwest tour, and they dedicated the second set to his memory. In that set, Bob Weir debuted a new verse he'd been writing during the tour, a psychedelic epic about a bus ride to oblivion. Cowboy Neal at the wheel of a bus to never ever land.
There was Cowboy Neal at the wheel of a bus to never ever.
That verse became part of the other one, a song the Dead would go on to play approximately 588 times over the next 27 years. Every single performance carrying Cassady's name in the lyrics. Every single performance a continuation of that first, knowing tribute. Parts of that Valentine's Day show ended up on Anthem of the Sun. Cassady's spirit literally baked into the Dead studio recordings. Jackson's biography describes it as the Dead at a magical peak, fully in command every step of the way, equally comfortable ripping through a fluttering Spanish-sounding jam or letting all their musical structures crumble and dissolve into dissonant sheets of white noise, feedback, and ultimately silence. And Weir wasn't the only one writing about Neal. In the early 70s, John Perry Barlow wrote Cassady, a double tribute to both a newborn baby named Cassady, the daughter of Eileen Law born at Weir's house, and to the ghost of Neal Cassady. The song was recorded for Weir's Ace album and debuted on stage in 1976. 2 songs in the Dead's catalog written by 2 different lyricists, both carrying Cassady's name into the future. He never recorded with them. He never toured with them, but his name lived in their set lists for 3 decades. So when people ask what made the Grateful Dead, why they improvised the way they did, why no 2 shows were ever alike, why their music felt like a living conversation rather than a rehearsed performance, the standard answers aren't wrong. Acid mattered, Kesey mattered, the Haight mattered, but the transmission mechanism, the actual human being who carried the beat aesthetic of spontaneity, rhythm, and present tense danger from 1940s Fillmore jazz clubs into the attic of a rock band's communal house, was one specific person. A man who was born into nothing, who stole cars and charmed writers, who drove a bus across America and lived in a rock band's attic, and taught them, through rhythm, through language, through the sheer gravitational pull of his presence, that the highest form of art isn't something you make, it's something you become. Garcia said it better than anyone ever will. He was the first person I met who he himself was the art. Neal Cassady, 1926 to 1968, the most important member of the Grateful Dead, never played a note.